I don't know whether you've heard of this game. It's been causing a lot of fuss because it looks really, really impressive for a sort of solo project. It's made by a solo developer. I think we're going to get kind of campy Victorian Brothers Grimm type thing, like you'd get in Fable, or one of those more sort of whimsical fantasy games mixed with what looks like a Souls-like. And let's see. Briarstone Scholar. Okay, so we've got a warrior, rogue, and a scholar. When you've got a game like this with kind of different character builds, you do need a sense of how those are going to be different quite early into development, I think. And I think just having 3 archetypes or even 2 archetypes is a good starting point, because if you try and make 10, you haven't really already defined how your kind of design works, and you might be just making loads of content for no reason. I think I went for the kind of wizard archetype. There's 3 classes in this so far. Left button for light attack and right trigger for heavy attack. And left button isn't light attack, it's block. Jumping feels a bit floaty. And the sound balance between swinging and connecting is a bit poor. Like, I think when you hit stuff, it needs to be a bit louder. It's looking good though. The environment looks lovely. It does feel like they've kind of tried to go exactly at the midpoint between like Elden Ring and Fable. Really nailed it from what I can see so far. A little bit grey, a little bit hard to distinguish things, but very, very pretty. Targeting right trigger. Okay. I haven't studied like sound design for swordplay super closely in other games, and it's something I'm going to have to pay more attention to, because I have a potential job coming up in the next couple of months where I think there's going to be a lot of sword fighting in the game, and I think it's going to mean that I really need to pay attention to that side of things in terms of like how sword fighting feels in other games. The kind of way the sword connects in this is a little bit weak. There's a very loud sword swing sound, and then the impact sound isn't very pronounced. Another game that wants me to learn how to parry. These are cool enemies, but we got lots of them at the same time, and it's a weird model to see lots of, because it looks like quite a unique character, right? And then when you see several of them together, it doesn't read as a sort of monster there'd be lots of together. I'm not entirely sure why. Quick plug in the middle of this video just to tell you about our Patreon. I have a Patreon that you can subscribe to, which gives you access to the Indie Game Clinic Discord. The Discord is a mix of people who support this channel via Patreon and people who have been on my shows and been invited to the Discord after that. So I do a series called Indies Under the Knife, where people send their games in, very brave people send their games that are half made to me, and I review them and look for problems with them, really. Doing indie games content which is very focused on like unknown games and how those games could be better and stuff like that. It's never going to do like hundreds of thousands of views, because it's just not about games people care about yet, because they are unfinished games. So I'm really grateful for everyone who supports this channel. Quicker we can get this number up to something higher than my rent, then the longer this channel will be able to go on for.
Whatever that thing is, I came to tell you, all is in order. Your curse may progress any way you please moving forward.
Thank you.
So far, I've had a few tutorial screens, I've wandered around the environment, done a little bit of fighting, and I think all the individual parts of this game are really cool, right? The animations all feel good, The environment looks good. There are times where it's a little bit hard to make out detail because we've got this very kind of flat Dark Souls kind of gloomy colouring. The only issue that I've really found so far is that we fight this same enemy lots of times. Here he is. You know, we had a cutscene where that guy's presented as being a big bad guy, and then we got like 4 or 5 of them here to fight as if they're just mindless drones. But they don't look like a kind of drone enemy. That looks like a mini boss or something, you know. I think if you're making an action RPG and you're making like a gameplay teaser for it, then having some variety of enemies in that is going to be vital, because at the moment this just shows us the same enemy copied a bunch of times. And you can get away with that if it's something where that thematically makes sense, right? If you've got a very bland enemy like a skeleton or a wolf, then you can put 4 or 5 of those together. But this being the first enemy we see, and it's used so repetitively, feels a bit strange because it looks like a special enemy. It looks like something that would come along with some smaller versions of itself, or, you know, not a cannon fodder repetitive enemy. If you think like the purpose of an early demo like this is to try and get people excited about the project, we're really repetitively using an enemy in this way, I don't know, it doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, I think. I received a tutorial screen about learning to parry. I think I just pulled one off then. The combat generally feels good. I'd like a little bit more impact when you hit with a strike or with a parry. I'm terrible at parrying in games anyway, so I'm not the best person to judge the kind of second by second feel of the combat in a Souls-like type game, but
whatever this is, it's more than one person. The way out straight ahead, but you're gonna have to make it to the gatehouse.
The voice acting is a little bit corny and cartoonish, but I think it kind of fits with what the game is going for, and it doesn't feel out of place, you know? That's kind of the thing about creative direction, is you have to pick a direction. And I think this is going for slightly cartoonish, a little bit whimsical, I would say, because of the Fable influence. I've seen the developer talk about this being influenced by Fable as well as Souls-likes, and you can even hear that in the music choice. The music is a little bit whimsical, even though it's dark. Here we go, another enemy. Now we've got some enemy variation. Just try the bow. I haven't tried the bow yet. So yeah, we do get some enemy variation. We get some dudes. It feels like it's in a funny order because the weird tree men feel like more of a special enemy than the guys. I guess we've been introduced to them first because they're easier. I would definitely say the colours of the health bar are way too dull. I have to really expend quite a lot of effort to make myself pay attention to how much health I have. And that's because it's a colour that just disappears when you're not looking directly at it, that health bar. Oof. When it comes to stuff like that that's around the edge of your screen and it's important, you need something to draw people's eye to it when it changes, or even when it's just static. And if you've got very high contrast iconography in the corners, or if you use a sort of brighter colour for things like health bars, then they're going to be more prominent, they're going to be easier to read. But brown on brown at the moment, you know, various shades of brown and grey, I get that it's going for a particular visual style, but that's important information to know every moment of combat, and I can't really see it unless I am very deliberately focused on it. Yeah, this is an interface that's been made by someone who is thinking about art direction rather than usability. I don't have a problem with the typography. The typography is very kind of retro Japanese, looks like Dark Souls 1. That's fine. Whatever, people who like the genre are gonna kind of get that, and it looks cohesive with the rest of the game. But this decision to make all of the interface very muted and very brown is gonna harm the playability of the game, I think. So I was talking about impact being an issue. I got hit a couple of times by these guys then. It was only by looking at the health bar that I knew, right? The moments where I am actually struck by an enemy and I lose some health, it doesn't really look like the character is getting hurt. It doesn't feel like they're getting hurt. You know, there's not enough feedback on the actual character model and the sound effects and whatever else you want to do to make the communication around damage clear. When enemies deal damage to my character, it's not clear enough, you know, for me to then understand the gameplay mechanics or to understand what's happening. And when I deal damage to a character, it's not really clear enough to make it satisfying or like a fun thing to do. And those are things you really need to nail quite early on in a action game before you make loads of content. So the two major problems we've got so far are the sort of challenge structure of, you know, introducing a bunch of these very repetitive monsters quite quickly, which I think is going to make people feel underwhelmed if this is their first experience of your world. And then even if we solve that problem, we've got this issue of the combat kind of feels okay for most part, but there are a lot of kind of sound effects which are either missing or too quiet. When those sound effects or visual effects, there could be additional visual effects, when those relate to the player getting hit, they are really important for the player to be able to understand what's happening in the game, right? Because at the moment, it feels like the only information that I'm losing health is that very hard to read health bar in the corner going down. And even if that health bar was bright red, which it probably should be, we would still need some in-world information that the player is getting hurt. We need more sound. We need the player character to flinch. It needs to be much clearer that the enemies are hitting you and you need to dodge more or block more or stay away from them. I literally have to look up at the health bar to even know that the enemy hit me. And then hitting the enemy, there's just not enough feedback about when I'm landing a strike. That is a communication issue, but it's also like a satisfaction issue of like players aren't going to feel good about this combat if you don't make them feel good. But you can see so many elements of this game are very strong, all of these animations and stuff. And I'm sure someone will tell me, oh, they've come from this asset thing or whatever. Like I don't care where things come from most of the time. I just care about consistency and the overall appeal of the game. I would say this is an incredibly strong game visually. I think if you want to lean into the Fable type whimsy a bit more, then maybe a little bit more lighting and a little bit more color and less gloom. But I think this is visually quite attractive, and all of the animation stuff works. It's more like VFX and audio feedback on the combat that needs to be fixed to make this a really good example of something in its genre, you know? Well, I'm stuck on a lever. See, again, beaten to death with 3 or 4 blows, and none of them looked or felt like anything was really happening. And then because the combat doesn't feel that juicy yet, just sort of makes me want to run past it like this. Just mug it off, just run past it. But the problem is they're a very sort of asymmetrical, biological shaped character, and that makes them look like clones of the same one, because they don't have the variation. But the issue I'm finding with all of the kind of little things I've pointed out so far with the sound and the interface makes me not really want to press on to try and continue it. I'm going to do my best because I want to see everything this demo's got in it. When I engage in this combat, it kind of gives me this sense of like, well, I wouldn't want to do this for hours and hours, right? And this is a game that has obviously already had quite a lot put into it. I think it really shows when you're doing something like a action RPG where combat or any kind of like physical skill-based thing is a central part of it. You really need to nail that first in terms of like getting all of this kind of sound and feedback stuff right. The impact when I roll into a barrel and smash a barrel, the sound of that is more impactful than hitting this guy. When I hit an object in the environment and it knows what material that is, the level of that sound effect and the amount of VFX, that's what I want when I'm fighting. Right, so at the moment it's like you've got all of this feedback for when you miss-hit, when you hit something in the environment you're not supposed to, and that's what the actual combat should feel like. You know, it's juicy. The combat isn't juicy yet because it doesn't have any of that stuff in. It's like you're fighting thin air. Barrel makes more complaint about being hit than this guy does. Make the VFX bigger, make the characters flinch, have like multiple layered sound effects, like a much heavier strike sound, and the occasional kind of audio to let us know that character is complaining about being hurt, you know? Put a lot of time into the kind of environmental sound and stuff, and I think this is the type of game where getting the combat sounding right should have been higher priority than even building an environment like this. Should have the impact feel and the sound right from like grey box stage of the project. What's over here? Old twin knives. They're at least giving me some different weapons to play around with, which is a good thing to do earlier in the demo, even if it's not actually how you plan to structure the full game. I'm also regularly getting into this state where I don't have any way to heal, and the combat does just sort of involve trading blows, so a lot of what we see here is really kind of what happens when you view game development as trying to go as quickly as you can towards something that looks like a game. Because you look at this and you think, oh, that's gorgeous, that's like a AAA game, that's a AA game. It is gorgeous. This has got the potential to be something really great. But I don't know why we've got to the stage where we've got all of this environment and we've started to have cutscenes and, you know, inventories and items to collect and stuff. And we're still in a place where some of the basic stuff of action RPG combat isn't there. The combat should feel really good before you kind of commit to making locations.
In your survival. But it's in both our best interests that you make it to the capital.
One thing I've noticed as well, just as a sort of kind of skill type thing, as a playtester here, is that I seem to do better in the combat when I just hammer them and don't focus too much on survival. Like if I just concentrate on trying to interrupt all of their attacks but I seem to be doing consistently better in the combat if I just focus on attacking and don't try and use the other features, which maybe that's just an early game thing because of the types of enemies we've got, but if it's a persistent pattern through the game, then there's not going to be a very high skill ceiling for people to enjoy. Feels good when you're out of combat. Moving this guy around feels great. The way he runs with his two knives, perfect. Chef's kiss, no complaints. I've found a few times now when I got stuck on a lever earlier, or a lever, I'm trying to roll out of it, and the roll isn't very forgiving in terms of letting you get through level geometry. I've found a few times where I've been cornered while fighting. I've tried to roll out of it and I haven't been able to, and I'm sure there are people watching this that are massive sort of Dark Souls game mechanics nerds and can kind of comment on this stuff properly, because I can't. But it kind of feels like there are situations where the character's hitbox needs to shrink so that they can get out of situations like being cornered. Yeah, getting stuck in a corner or getting stuck on a lever and not being able to move is not great.
I don't have much stake in your survival, but it's in both our best interests that you and make it to the capital as soon as possible. Whatever this is, it's more than one person. The way out straight ahead.
Really great sort of jumping attack. Kung Fu movie vibes on that jumping attack. One of these guys around the corner in every direction in this area. It kind of feels a bit one-trick pony to be using the same encounter design trick so many times in a row. Be careful when approaching enemies in peculiar locations. You never know what might be lying around the corner. Surprise your players with this one amazing level design trick. I would say the density of the ambushes in this game is there's just too many, because now I expect them. If you're putting in so many ambushes that I'm checking every corner for them, then you've got too many ambushes. Cheap encounter design trick of using an ambush every single time feels like it's trying to cover up for something else. So I'm going to run past all of these guys because I'm sick of trying to fight them. So I think what we've done in this area really is we've got all of the basic weapons, all the different weapon types you can collect in the game. And we've made an area where you can run around and you can get each one of them. So you can kind of feel the attack animations and general feel of each kind of attack. You know, I've already picked the weaker character type, so that greatsword is of no interest to me now. And I'll admit I am a roller in these games and not a blocker. So I guess what we're getting is spells are really just like the special move of an item. Really difficult to get out of those corners once you're stuck. Again, I don't know how Souls games handle it, but doing something to maybe reduce the hitbox of the character when they roll may be a way of doing it. I understand that could introduce some exploits, but there are lots of places in this game where you just get hemmed in, and rolls that you would think help you to escape do not. So yeah, if we go here, we've got combat tests from 2 years ago. So this has been going for 2 years. So they have gone the kind of correct route of greyboxing the game first and building this kind of much richer demo with environments and stuff in it later on, but the sound effects here seem a lot meatier. So I think maybe they've toned them down in the demo, and I think that might have been a mistake. I also like these character models. Maybe these are like assets that were just used for an early prototype and then swapped out for his own stuff, but I like these guys. I didn't get to the point in the demo where I saw the boss, but
so generally the Grimwick Feral is a perfect balance between this structure.
That's the same model as that enemy that we just fought lots of, right? So I don't know if this is telling me that if I got to the end of that demo, the boss would have just been a big version of one of the things I'd already fought, which is going to feel really underwhelming to people, I think.
Gap for melee.
Let's just see how it's marketed. I think it would be interesting to do in this case.
In the land of Boltane, a long shadow has been cast, tearing the residents from their homes. Awaken as the Chosen, a champion with no memory of their past, but a shared destiny with the twisted fate of the land. Fade.
So yeah, I think you've done very well here so far, but I just take a lot of issue with the amount of feedback that's missing during combat. I think you should take some of that 25 grand and pay an audio specialist like 2 or 3 days to make you like a big stack of high impact sound effects for the combat in this game, because whatever is in there is just not working for me, and it's really letting the game down. It's such a core part of an action RPG. I think this first chapter demo that we've just taken a look at is really underwhelming for that reason. And it's very easy with a trailer to sort of wow people with how the game looks, and you can even like dub over sound effects in key places. But as soon as people are playing it and feeling it, then those small issues to do with whether it feels like something connects in combat, whether it feels like your player character is getting hit when they do get hit, you know, all the issues I had with just awareness of the health bar. You know, the only time I knew if my character was getting hit was I had to look at the health bar in the corner directly. It wasn't bright enough, it wasn't prominent enough, and the kind of attacks on my player character didn't feel impactful enough for me to know moment to moment that I was getting hit. And these are all things that you can sort of hide in a trailer, but as soon as you've got a gameplay demo, it becomes very apparent because you can feel them, and things that are to do with like subtle moment to moment feedback to the player. It's an interesting problem because, you know, obviously if you hadn't gone this route of making the trailer first, you wouldn't have the development budget to do this game for however many months of time that gives you. But you know, if I was making a game like this with a commercial team who were like full-time employees, I definitely wouldn't have got this far into development of having like all of this environment to show and all these different enemy animations and stuff until those fundamental things of like how it feels to hit things and be hit were correct. I presume this has got a Discord community and stuff attached to it. I'd really be interested in hearing from some of their playtesters and what they felt. But one of the dangers with Kickstarter is you're sort of encouraged to promise more and more content, and you know, that could be levels, it could be enemies, it could be weapons, variations in content. And I think what we've seen from the demo is that the core of the game is, I would say it's about 80% there in terms of moving around, attacking, all of that stuff. The animation, timing and everything like that looks really good, right? And that's why this has had such a sort of impressed reaction on everything I've watched about it and why I wanted to play it. Those extra bits of attention to the audio, the VFX, and whatever other forms of feedback, whether it's just kind of stuttering characters using IK and stuff like that, that last 20% of the effort is going to go an incredibly long way to making this feel more professional.